Of the program right now, still looking at the new docket for Aden Duale, Minister of Defense. What is up his collective sleeves? This is what we are thrashing out with our panelists here this morning. Thank you for staying with us. We continue apace with that, even as we bring it to a close as well. And maybe I'll just go back to you, General. We have the white paper, of course, the defense white paper that was also drawn during the tenure of President Uhuru Kenyatta. But looking at the global environment as it is right now, in light of what is happening in Ukraine, sometimes they say injustice anywhere is a threat of justice everywhere. So it might seem to be very far off and away, but it's bound to affect us in one way or the other. First of all, will you tell us what is really encapsulated in the white paper itself? What are some of the key highlights in the white paper of the defense during President Uhuru's tenure? Do we need to have a new white paper, so to speak, with the current regime as well?
Well, thank you, Liba. The white paper was actually very timely in terms of its publication at the time, under the former CDF. And it's something that actually draws again from the Constitution in terms of indicating how the armed forces will be governed, touching on the values that do drive us, how we will do business, and also touching on how we'll handle some of the national security challenges that we are undertaking. And in terms of the concept itself, the white paper is normally found in most professional armed forces coming from the government itself, in terms of addressing the current challenges that are on at the time. In fact, building on in UK and the US is very popular. You know that under different regimes or at different situations, you'll find a white paper coming up. So ours was very timely, being the first one in terms of guidance, in terms of direction, and really defining how we want to conduct our business. And you find that within that, in fact, one of the key elements of that is our the KDF values, which are well encaptured there. The 10 of them, you know, if I can recall clearly, I wish you could bring it up. Again, building on the same point that
yes.
I said earlier. The first one is that we are apolitical. We don't take part in politics. I can recall a few of them. Just leave it. I can recall a few of them.
Oh, you can recall them.
We are apolitical. We do not take part in politics per se, but understand that the Constitution gives me a right as an individual to go and cast my vote. So on that day, I'll go out, cast my vote, and walk back into the barracks. I'll not campaign for anybody. I'm not sure what direction I've taken. I'll keep quiet and retain that. Then number two is the issue of being subordinate to the political authority. That's our second value within that white paper. That at any one time, we are insubordinate to political authority, and indeed to the commander-in-chief being the head of the armed forces. And for that, actually, the armed forces, Kenyan armed forces, stands out. We have done very well in terms of our loyalty, both to the nation, to the presidency, and indeed to the citizenry. On that, we have stood out very well. Now, the other point that comes in is the element of professionalism, that in all that we do, we'll always perform within the guidelines and instructions and in conformity with the law, and work to achieve what is desired in a very professional manner. And I want to again emphasize that in this regard, our armed forces have stood out very strongly in terms of doing properly and clearly what needs to be done. And that we have done, and in the future we'll do it also. Mr. Rungu mentioned about the issue of that oversight. I want to also indicate clearly that we indeed, as part of government, have that national oversight. The Auditor General and all the entities, even the Parliament, have that control of us in terms of oversight, and we complied with that as required. Now, the other point under the same element is the issue of patriotism. It comes in as one of the key bullets within that area that will stand out at any one time for the love of this country. And we will defend this country, you know, at the best of our ability across board, wherever we are. Then tied to that is the element of national values, that we indeed, being part of the armed forces, are covered indeed by national values, and we will conform to that and carry that with us in all that we actually do. Then the element of integrity, again coming out, that indeed, in all that we do, we'll stand above board and do what is right. In fact, and in that regard, I can strongly say and confidently that we have indeed been a very good example and a role model for this country on how we do our business. In fact, our issues have been very much open to the public, and you can see all that we do. As I said, some issues touch on national security, and at times we may go a bit overboard. Again, not on a bad faith. It's in the interest of preserving our national security. And sometimes we will do things that we don't announce in public, but indeed, again, in the interest of national security. These are a few of the points that come within the white paper.
All right. Is it a requirement that when we have a new regime, also you have an overhauling of this defense white paper? So are we likely to see a new defense white paper being brought out?
Now, there is no really proper guidance on that. I will say it's driven by issues. Driven by both issues, both local and international. For instance,
that's what I'm saying. Right now, things have actually changed globally.
If they have changed,
then do we need to reconfigure this white paper?
What we do, because part of what national white paper will do is to indicate how we respond to certain situations, or how we're going to carry forward our duties in advancing our interests. So it's not really something that is timed. That yes, change of regime. No, as I said, it may be if need be. If there are new issues coming up, we'll come up and do that. If there are major security issues, both locally and internationally, that will affect the way we do things, we'll then go again and review our white paper. If there's a major reform in the armed forces, currently we have 3 services, Army, Navy, and Air Force. At any one time, we have one in the lead. For instance, now, the Army is in the lead. Should there be need for instance, based on a change in operations and war, that the Air Force becomes the key lead in our operations, that will determine our doctrine, how we're going to do things, and therefore that calls for a review of the white paper to reflect the need for that change in doctrine and how we respond and do things in that regard.
Okay, all right. Professor Agwaji.
You look fascinated with the white paper.
Yes.
Have you ever seen a black paper? why this tautology of white paper for white paper? The paper is always white. But let's get this. The defense white paper of May 2017 captured the situation both nationally, regionally, and globally, and the challenges for the Kenyan Defense Forces at that time. But the moment it was published, it became a document, a legacy of this country. So it's not a question of whether you revise it or not. It's there. It's cast in concrete. It's law. And it's going to define the operations and the behaviors and the activities of the military as discussed there, because it was accepted. Now, the May 2017 Defense White Paper was called the 2017 edition, because there will be another edition and another edition and another edition, and nothing prevents, having a new edition of the same Defense White Paper, the 2022 White Paper, meaning it will possibly take into account the impact of the war in Ukraine on Kenya and the role we're playing. Two, the impact of the ongoing war against Al-Shabaab in Somalia by the Somali people themselves, and what implication it has for our operations there in that country. So revising is quite in order. So that's one. The second was Irungu. I thought Irungu was going to come with a heavy jab that was going to bring me down. I just featherweight. Featherweight. Now, the point of accountability. I mean, from a human rights perspective, you want to subordinate the various organs to the civilian, like, for example, the Auditor General and all. The military is always audited that way. And remember, the accounting officer is a civilian. Yes. And he goes to defend the military budget in the civilian space, including if there is a case of corruption, you go to EACC. So I don't think the civil military cooperation is kind of operated in silo, in another kind of auditing, accounting system. No, it is audited by the public. There is only one thing that those of us in the human rights and other organizations forget, that the ultimate secret and the strength of a nation is the knowledge about its defense forces. The moment you publicize, like for example, you want to audit that we bought 5 drones of this particular caliber and for certain, that's really, that doesn't make sense, because the Al-Shabaab will know that we have them, the others will know, so the enemy,
but that is not the accountability we're really talking about. We're talking about yes.
On one hand, you're saying that it's open and available to the public.
Yes.
On the other hand, you are saying categorically it should not be. No. Let me ask you, how many officers have we lost in Somalia since the operation? How much money have we spent? If you want me to get into the heavyweight Muhammad Ali corner, I can go there. These are the questions that are skirted really by the state, and I understand there's a level of sensitivity around that. I understand that, but I do understand the fact that if you want to extend the role of the military in our borders, then there is a level of accountability that has to be raised for that to happen. For example, what did it cost us to produce that wonderful archives that we now have at Uhuru Gardens?
Yes.
Do we have a figure on that? No.
No.
Do we know, for example, how efficient the NMS was in terms of the installation of the health facilities? I mean, these are the questions that Kenyans...
The Kenya Meat Commission as well.
The Meat Commission.
Yes.
That is there, actually. All those figures are there. I mean, I don't know about the others, but I know about the railway. Because I was the rehabilitation. When the IMF and the World Bank told us to rehabilitate the railway in 2003, 2004, 2005, and there you privatized it to the Rift Valley or whatever, we knew the cost that was given of doing that. And now the railway was rehabilitated and the cost is there. It's way, way, way below the market cost. Now, the problem we have with the civil military cooperation or intervention is one, that you undercut certain existing businesses. And there is likely to be a backlash.
Indeed.
So the question is, if you call the military to intervene in a experience space, how do you contain the stakeholders within that particular sector? That is the big problem.
But even you come to that particular decision, I think that will be the last resort. They should come in as a last resort, that we exhausted all other avenues. So the military is the only person who can...
No, you call them. It's not the port of Rust call, really, in that sense. It is the country that decides where do you want to move your technology, for example. Like if you want to make drones for marketing, even for weddings, for people to use in weddings, where do you make them? You make them within that particular circle, because this is a natural resource that can be misused. So you decide that way. It's a country that decides. It is not the military that decides.
Thank you.
It's not the military that decides.
Because we've got a few minutes left, and in about 5 days' time, the world's leaders, including our own 5th president, will be in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Can we talk a little bit about the conference of the parties? Because I think this is a big issue.
We will come to that.
Yeah,
we will come to that. So we want just to wind up with the military. But you raise also a good point, especially now on the accountability with the POWs as well. We had captives who were taken even from as soldiers there in Somalia. Most of the families, they don't know their whereabouts completely. Some of their bodies were not really brought back. So when you talk about accountability in that particular, I don't know, this is a military domain, it's shrouded in secrecy, but I know, I have friends who were involved in that particular war, and for the families who were frustrated, there was no communication even for 4 months regarding the bodies, where they were, the forensics that actually came back to be done here in the country, so that they will be able to identify the bodies of his families as well. So there were people who were captured. Up to date, we don't know what is their whereabouts. They are not dead, but we were told they were prisoners of war.
Well, I was lucky to visit Maria Kani as an accompanying spouse, and the major issue of the visit was basically those, and a monument was unveiled by the top military in honor of those. And one of the main achievements that was made was basically the taking care of those who have been left behind by those who have paid the ultimate price. So I was observing on the margins, and I could say, sometimes I wish I was a soldier, because sometimes our fathers in the industries and elsewhere pass on, but they have nowhere to fall back to. But the military is increasingly getting that. From the people who were attending that meeting I attended were actually the children, wives, and husbands of those who might have fallen in the battle line. And it was a very moving event for me to see that these people accept that this is normal. Our father fell. Not the way, but you were seeing it, the bar, that they are not there. These were taking it as their national duty, even the families, because they're they have grown up in this, and it was very moving for me to see that. I think some of these things are not made public by virtue of what the military is. It's out there, so you don't hear about it. But what they were doing, that kind of intervention on behalf of the family to ensure that the children and the families of those who have paid the ultimate price do not become destitute. That to me was great.
All right, thank you. Samira?
You know, the issue of the military and the relations between the military and civilians, I think, is very emotive. And Kenya, and I think most of the countries that are in the African Union mission in Somalia, they don't announce their casualties. And for them, it is not to expose to the enemy how much they have lost. There's other reasons that they don't announce them. But I think sometimes it wipes away that legacy, and it wipes away that pride that somebody actually gave their life, sacrificed their life for their country. Or for the cause, for the African cause. So I don't know if it's something that needs to change in the future, but for now it's very emotive when you see someone who, mostly they're soldiers who lose their lives, and their families are not able to see their names at least even recognized publicly. I think it's something that needs to change. But I would like to say Kenya does well. A lot of the African Union, the African Union troop contributing countries do well for their soldiers, compared to, if you'd say, in Somalia, when a soldier loses his life, or even not loses his life but loses a limb and is no longer able to be in active service. You don't have the benefits that they do here in Kenya. So I would say there is a lot more to be done, but it would be good to recognize that at least.
I need to add something on this.
Sure.
First, maybe to clear the air about a few issues that have come up. First is our participation in national development. When we take on, for instance, the City Council and assist with General Badi. When we take on the railway to Kisumu and help in the construction. When we take on KMC and come in terms of support, we come up on other events that we do, like, for instance, the delivery of food services to those who are suffering now from the drought. These are not basically actions driven from within the military. They come from the political leadership. We don't come out and say, I want to do this. We don't do that. We are confined within what we do. And as the Professor said, it's when we have that extra resource, or we are free, and we are called on to do it. So we don't really compete with others to go and do it. We don't come out and say we want to do it. No. We actually asked to come. And when we come, we actually are fall within the subjects of Auditor General and all that, in terms of how there are budgets to that, and we conform within that budget. So that's not something that we really want to compete or seem to be coming out on our own. No, we are called in. And we come out, we didn't go back. If the government so feels that we should go back to the barracks, we have no problem with that. That's our specialty. We'll do it, but we know that we have extra capacity that we can actually put to the benefit of Kenyans. Number two, a very good point from Madam, in the sense that we don't publicize all that we do. We don't come out and saying the good that you have done, say yes, we have done this, and make all the noise. At the same time, we are, as I said, a professional force. Sometimes we do incur casualties. We don't come out and announce, yes, we have gone through this and incurred casualties. But I want to assure you, and Kenyans, we are actually there for them. They must realize that. We are there on our own. We are there for Kenyans, for the defense of this country, 24/7. And sometimes we go through very bitter experiences. And I always talk about the issue of ultimate sacrifice. The Kenyans don't know. They must appreciate we're not on our own. We're here for them, under their direction, to defend them. But sometimes we suffer, both in terms of the soldier and the families. And at this point, they must come really and support us. Now, the issue of caution again, you know, that when you are out there in operations, let's say in the north or the northeast and northern, in defense of the country, and we suffer those casualties, the repercussions in terms of our response can be very severe.
Yes.
I want to say for us, we have really controlled ourselves. The way we have responded to attacks on us by either Al-Shabaab or even local forces sometimes within the country that come in. We have really gone into control. Had we gone out as others do in other countries, it will have been severe. We have really been able to control ourselves. And when you see us also going into areas of trying to establish what goes on, unfortunately, Mr. Irungu, there are Kenyans who don't cooperate as required. The Kenyans who understand that they play a role in national security and that they should not be doing what they are doing. And sometimes we go and tell them, tell us. Because I can assure you, there's no single incident of insecurity in this country that another Kenyan does not know. They all know. To a point where I'll say the issues of, for instance, in West Pokot and Turkana, it's something the new government should take on very seriously. Go and deal with it with the locals and move on. Not this time. And the issue of Al-Shabaab. Locals know what is going on. Engage them, get their support, get their confidence, and address those issues through softer power, not this hard power that you're coming with. But I want to ask Kenyans, please support us, please bear with us. We are sometimes going through a strain, and we don't want really to go beyond the limits and need their support in that regard. Thank you.
And I think, you know...
Yeah, I think, you know, just whenever we call for more, I guess, accountability, whenever we call for more openness, I guess, in terms of the Kenya Defence Forces, it is not a critique of the Kenya Defence Forces. I think that's very clear. And maybe just, you know, just to just be very explicit, you know, much of what is happening with the KDF in Somalia is really upholding international values of human rights, democracy, religious freedoms, women's rights, for example. And, you know, it is the case that, you know, many of our officers have, I think as Brigadier said, experienced, you know, the ultimate sacrifice, and their families are hurting as a result of that. I just feel that sometimes, you know, if Kenyans knew more, they would actually care more, and that this would not be the unforgotten, you know, this would become the forgotten war, and they would be the forgotten fallen. I think that's the key point. You know, I'm always reminded when I travel to the United States, I think the United States has such an interesting culture around the military, you know. Yes. People who served in Vietnam, you know, still, you know, they go into public wearing these caps saying, I have served, you know.
Indeed.
And, you know, you'll find people, you know, buying them lunch, buying their entire family lunch. My stepfather is actually a Vietnam veteran. And, you know, he is venerated.
He's venerated, of course.
As a family, we feel very proud of him, you know. And that's what we need to feel for all the Kenyan soldiers, that, you know, do what many of us would not do, which is put our lives in front of our, you know, our faith and our belief in this country.
Of course, and they have the flags hoisted there from the homestead as well. But critically...
Comment on this. It is true, and I think this is for Brigadier and others who are within the military. We are in the civilian space ourselves. I have walked into many of the spaces, courtesy of being an accompanying spouse, and I've seen all those who have passed on in Mogadishu or in Jubaland or wherever. There are monuments.
Their monuments.
In their names. Yes. And their names inscripted and what they were serving and everything. But then these monuments are within the barracks or the military space, which is not open to the civilians. So that the military know, when we are saying what we are saying, that, oh, they are not remembered and oh, where they are laughing at us. But then what they don't know is we cannot accept that space. Therefore, they are simply heroes within the military. They are not heroes within the national space. And I think what Irungu is saying, and I support that 100%, is that we need to start owning up and kind of paying back for the sacrifices of our people through honor and other deeds that we can do, the small things that people do in order to appreciate what others have done. Very many families of the soldiers are there. Their fathers and their mothers have passed on our behalf. Now, it will be a great thing for me to pay school fees or even buy Christmas gift or Ramadan gift, whatever I have for the foreign. I think that's what Irungo is saying, and that one we support. But already within the military is done, but it is behind the barbed wire.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But I want to thank also the panelists here. I think when we began this conversation, when we had Irungo Hilton, you may remember Major Lucy Mukiria, yes, when we talk about Veterans Bill, I think she's a lady we should in this country also appreciate, because she's the one who came up with this particular Veterans Bill, Major Lucy Mukiria, and we were speaking about it when we were on the other side of the tracks, standing on guard as well. And to see it now is an act that has been appreciated, and to just venerate these, soldiers, at least, that is something we should congratulate her. I think she's not been really congratulated enough. I don't know what you have to say about that, because she really pushed the envelope. We speak about it, but...
I mean, I personally have a very soft spot for retired Major Lucy Mukiria, because she was relentless on this issue.
Indeed.
And she's a psychologist. She's one of the very few women psychologists, so she understands what trauma is. She understands what the long-lasting impact of war and conflict is on people who survive it and their families. And she has pushed this bill as hard as possible. So just congratulations, retired Major Lucy Mukiria, and to all of the people who supported the bill, including Honorable Pareno, I think, who sponsored this particular bill. Let's press the government to make sure that it's implemented, that it is resourced, and that it does not suffer for lack of attention. It cannot sit on our shelves and just simply catch dust.
Right. And However, you are Lucy Mukiria. Welcome back to the show. Yeah, we'll continue with the good work that you started as well. All right. We want now to turn our focus on COP27 in light of what the world is going through right now, also with the cancel culture that we saw before with the Donald Trump as well. And according to World Bank, that is African Development Bank, I should say, Sub-Saharan needs over 67 billion shillings for climate compensation. And it says, like the rest of the continent, this is Eastern Africa, like the rest of the continent, is owed significant carbon credits created by industrialization in the more developed world. That is according to the African Development Bank. That carbon credits, often referred to as offsets, have an important dual role to play in the battle against climate change. They enable companies to support decarbonization beyond their own carbon footprint, thus accelerating the border transition to a lower carbon future. And the Lender's Regional Economic Outlook 2022, released on Friday, said that the region's estimated carbon credits using the discounted social cost of carbon is $4,956 on per capita basis during 2022-2050, implying that the region is owed $1,960 billion. We can discuss that just as a segue to, of course, Egypt's COP27. Let's just begin with you from that particular front. I think this is a very providential time for this particular conference, just building on the Paris and where we had also, the last one was in the UK. We can discuss about that. There's a lot of funding that also was geared towards Africa. But even when you're talking about carbon credits, many have been debating this, that of course Africa emits less of the emission, to the global warming as it is. Why should we be credited? Yet we really suffer at the end of the day. It seems like there's a bit of, so to speak, immorality in it, right? That somebody is injuring you and compensating you at the end of the day.
So first of all, just say the Conference of the Parties takes place in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's an Egyptian town in just 5 days' time. And the world's leaders will be there. We're expecting President Ruto to be there also. I saw a newspaper report suggesting that he was the clean energy hustler, which means that the hustler concept, I think, has gone international now. But, you know, he really is riding on some successes that we've seen in the Jubilee administration of the last 10 years of shifting our energy sources to renewable energy. I think we're at 80%. There is a commitment, I think, with Kenya Kwanza to move it to 100% by 2030. So there is a domestic commitment to this. But I think coming back to your question, which is, you know, when we looked at the, let's look at food insecurity. So you've got about 800 million people across the world that are currently starving. Something like about 2/3 of them are in this region, in the East African region. But all of those countries put together produce less than 0.2% of carbon emissions, which means that those that are experiencing the worst of not just climate crisis, but a climate catastrophe, are actually responsible for a fraction of what is creating it. And I think that's where the climate justice conversation comes from, but particularly for countries like us. So, you know, as we see these terrible photographs of, Kenyans emaciated, struggling, and as we hear the Deputy President rallying the county governors to speak and to act on climate catastrophe, we also need to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, we've seen some really bizarre climatic incidents. You know, 1/3 of Pakistan was flooded in the last year or so, since Glasgow. Europe this summer saw probably the hottest summer in 500 years, right? So anybody who is still a climate denialist, must be challenged at a moment like this. So there are a lot of expectations in terms of COP27, but I think the biggest one really is that we would see a fund, and I think the figure that they're looking for is $100 billion that is set aside for loss and damage to the global south. It is only Denmark, I think, who has generated a paltry, I mean, it's better than everybody else, but they've put together a $13 million package. But, you know, in the context of $100 billion, we are still very far from what's needed. I think the other thing that we do need to see more movement on is we do need to see a reduction in the use of fossil fuels. And this is where President Ruto can provide global leadership by essentially demanding, based on our own experience, that we are not going to invest in coal-based energy. Now, the big challenge, of course, is Ukraine. Because Ukraine has shifted all the calculations for all the economists and the environmentalists globally, in the sense that we have a raging fuel crisis, we have a raging energy crisis, there is increasing inflation, food prices, and many nations that might have been interested in looking at alternatives, perhaps for short-term interest, might go back to very costly, very dangerous technology that increases the heat of the planet. So I think these are the big issues in the next 5 days.
I was reading it somewhere, I think from the Scientific American, that the ice shelves are melting right now, and the projection that it's going to be very catastrophic in 2030 has been taken down to 2023, just next year. And they're saying, in regard to the global warming, the 1.5 degrees Celsius is going to be intense from next year. We've seen the floodings happening in Nigeria. And in terms of just preparation as a country, since this is next year, if all those projections will be right, then it seems we need to be preparing for some heavy floodings here with an Indian Ocean just across here. I wanted just to ask from that particular point of view, even with the government coming with a climate emergency, initiative from the plan, the manifesto. Speaking broadly, what should be the preparation aspect of it? Because as a country, we don't want to be gotten flat-footed like with the pandemic. Everyone was, taken by surprise. But now the projections are here. If the scientists are right, the floods will be here. It might be in the scale of what Nigeria has gone through right now. How prepared are we?
Well, there are two issues here. I don't want to sound like a climate denialist, really. But what we need to do ourselves as Kenyans and as human beings is to look at what we need to do ourselves, just what we need to do. because the rest we can't deal with. If we discover that it's the sun that is moving too close to the earth, or the earth that's moving too close to the sun, what can you do about it? Can you push it away a little bit so it's colder? No, you can't.
You can prepare some canopy.
No, sure. But I think what the policy that Kenya is taking, and I think Kenya has been a leading nation in this crusade, or this case, from the time of the Moi through the time of the Kibaki, who pushed it further, and now we are where we are. And I think William Ruto has a heritage to ride on. If there is a single thing that is going to ride on, that is a Kenyan heritage. It's our response to issues of climate change, issues of environment, and such. And his promise to kind of plant 5 billion trees within the next 5 years is really a welcome move. And that will help us get 10% of our nation covered by forests. I think what we have not done best, particularly from the rural part of things, is this carbon sink. And I thought Irungu would educate us on this, the carbon sinks, whereby by just planting trees, you are investing. It's not just you are doing philanthropic work to save the planet from, from this catastrophe. You are also getting an income, particularly if you are in the global south, where we have not polluted our environment. How can we access this, pay for planting trees? Because our peasants, our poor people who have planted a lot of trees in their small pieces of land, and need to get a commensurate share of that kind of thing. And I guess this is what they're going to talk at Sharm el-Sheikh and later on in other places where they are going to discuss this issue. The UN here should be, in the forefront of educating peasants on how to access these resources. Because they are planting trees every day, but nobody is going to them to tell them, thank you for planting trees. So they are doing philanthropy, but nobody is recognizing it. Let's be paid for the trees we plant, because that's an obligation that the world has taken on board in this case. The final point is about industrialization. Kenya has committed to industrialize. Ukraine has happened, and even before Ukraine, we told that you cannot do coal, you cannot do this, and that's what Africa has. It's just recent. Africa is the newest frontier in the discovery of gas, oil, and coal. And now, at this time, when we are just about to get industrialized in other countries, we are told we can't industrialize on coal, we can't industrialize on carbon, on all these things. Is there no technology that would enable us to industrialize with coal and these others, which enabled other countries to industrialize, including China, while at the same time protecting our environment? We need to strike that balance. Because if you live in a healthy environment and you are dying of hunger and poverty, so the climate change must ensure that there is prosperity in Africa, not poverty. Because if it means that you have to hold back certain imperatives of development, like industrialization, in order to, then you're basically telling me to pay the ultimate sacrifice and never be noticed for it, which is basically what we going on. So we need to think about how do we balance between climate change and the imperatives of development, which is basically poverty eradication at the same time. I think those are the issues that are worrying us. I wouldn't worry much about what the scientists are saying. I mean, the problem I have with the climate change debate, and I must put it on record, is that sometimes it can be alarmist. Somebody just wakes up in the morning and say the world is going to end in 2023. What am I supposed to do? But what you have asked is a very legitimate question, that what kind of preparedness do we put in place as we are told this is not happening? I don't want to spend my time preparing for these voodoo kind of statements about God coming in 2022, end of the year or whatever. I don't want to prepare that. But it is important for us to go back to the basics. Every 10 years, from time immemorial, and Professor Bethwell Ogot and other historians, I'm not talking about foreign historians, our own local historians, have documented from their research that every 10 years we'll have a major drought that lasts for more than 2 years. And that every 5 years we'll have a minor drought that will skip a season or two, so there will be sufficient food. We know that from the beginning of the century, 1900, even before. What have we done to ensure here that for every drought that comes, our cows don't die, our granaries have food to eat, and that we don't go begging for food aid? We've not done anything. So this preparedness is not just about the climate change. It's about the nation adopting a culture of planning 7 years ahead, like Joseph in the Bible. 7 years, because we have 7 years of plenty. When you have plenty, then you plan for how you're going to deal with the lean years. Now, what we are not doing is basically planning for lean years. And I guess the hustlers should do this for us. Build silos. Go to the military and tell them to do big ship floating the Indian Ocean as part of our brew economy. And let us store our seeds there. So when we don't need them, when we take them to the market, because they're already en route to the market. When we need them, our ship come closer and off-road for our people to eat. But this idea of small doses of fertilizers here, some hoe here, some seeds here, that's not going to help us. Do a big thing.
There is a band-aid solution just
momentarily. Yeah, don't bring us bandages. Help us not to do big things. Because if, for example, we are going to be the nation that we are imagining ourselves to be, for example, in the region, Somalia will look to us as Kenyans. So when they need their wheat, we should be able to drive our sheep towards Mogadishu and supply Somalia with wheat, because we can grow it in this country. If Tanzania need this, we do that. If Congo need this, we move to the ports, so that we are not just a regional hegemon in terms of security. Others, we are a regional hegemon in terms of philanthropy and humanitarian response by a country is dependent on that country's ability to deal with its own problems.
Thank you. Thank you. If I may come to you, Samira, we remain with a few minutes, because I think the issue of the climate change is becoming bigger, because even health-wise, as we've seen. There are rising cases of asthma, there are rising cases of eczema. People cannot see the connection of how climate change is impacting them. We always think about the floods and the droughts, but even health-wise, lung diseases, people are talking about it right now. They are increasing every day. But if we are to learn from COVID-19, because other countries, I think now they're bracing themselves in terms of preparation. We even have the Ministry of Pandemics, where they learn the pandemics, they're learning from COVID-19, what it has taught. There's a long COVID people are still suffering from as well. From your assessment, how do we then prepare in light of information that we do have? Even if we have that voodoo commentary or a voodoo prophecy that is coming, at least it's an information we should act. We should act on and prepare.
I think so. The professor is right to say that we shouldn't be alarmed, but I think we should plan. And especially with Kenya's economy, when you look at the economy, it depends highly on the resources, the natural resources that we have, specifically agriculture, making up around 22% of our economy. And going forward, even if, the professor said there's constant droughts every 10 years, but we know now that this is the longest failed rain seasons that we've had. I think we're going to the 5th failed rainy season. This has not happened in 40 years. So I think we need to start looking at other sources of for our economy, because as soon as you don't have jobs, then you have that rapid urbanization. This will just expound the problem that we currently have. So I think he's right to say that we need to plan, and we haven't planned for even the regular droughts that we used to have. Our region, the Horn of Africa, is a semi-arid, mostly area, and that we should plan for that and economically plan for it.
Right. Brigadier.
Thank you, Diba. Indeed, very interesting with the COP coming up and the challenges that go along with it. And two things for me on this. One,
before you even ask or go with the two things, I just wanted to know from the military perspective. I know you normally have all this analysis. Climate change, where does climate change and military come into play? So that, because you're always ahead of the game. What are some of the instruments that you used for these projections? Maybe we should learn from them. Yeah.
You're reminding me the invasion. You're reminding me of the invasion of Hitler towards Moscow and what happened along the way. That major disaster that really affected him, and he had to go back. But for us, we only believe in all that we do, looking ahead and seeing How is the environment? How is the situation? How is the issues that affect the oppression? And we respond, because you have no control over that. We respond to whatever is there and make the best out of it. As I was saying in that regard. But most of the country, I'm looking at much more out of this now. A bit of support, from partners in terms of the global South in support, in terms of damages so far that we have seen happening in the past. And then also, together, 6 common solutions to the challenges facing us in the years ahead. But as I say that also, I want to reflect back on where we are as Kenya and really demand that we have a good time with the new government in place now, that we're having rains now. Unfortunate thing is that the rains will come, no harvest will be done, and then we are back to square one again. I want to request that we put every penny that we have to serving our national development, and indeed to serving Wanjiku across the country. And I'm told Kenya is very well endowed. We have the resources. Just put it in the right place where it's desired to make that impact and make change as desired. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's just get a round of closing remarks as well. You want to say something, Professor, briefly?
You are such a good, do I say advocate of COP27? As King Charles III invited you.
He may not be attending.
He has not been invited by his Prime Minister.
But, but he has not. He's not attending. Actually, it's almost official. But he's having a party or a reception. That's why I'm asking whether you've been invited to that reception.
Also his coronation has been, tamed down a bit. The opulence and the expense that goes with it.
Correct.
Sunak is really tight on him. So a lot of this traveling and then to Raj that will go to COP27 that people are really uncalled for. You've had so many people who are not even in any way remotely connected with what is happening in Egypt going, and they're taking advantage of this as well. But yes.
So he's not coming.
So a couple of thoughts.
Final thoughts, yeah.
One is that, I agree with Peter that actually panic doesn't help, right? But I think there has to be a sense of urgency. There has to be a sense of disquiet, anxiety, because there will be no progress, there will be no sense of the urgency of now unless we begin to face very squarely what is happening in our economies and our society. So I think there is importance here. I think I would like to also, just as parting shots, to just, to encourage the government to deliver on its promise of 30% tree cover. 15 billion trees?
15 billion trees,
The Anglican Church, under the leadership of Archbishop Olisa Pitt, has been doing great work in this area. There are young activists who realize that the elder activists, like those of us here on this table, have actually failed their generation by not reining in climate catastrophe. Women like Liz Wadhuti and others who will be in Sharm el-Sheikh. One person that will not be in Sharm el-Sheikh, and I think it's just important from a human rights perspective to mention, is somebody by the name of Allah Abd El Fattah, who is a human rights activist who is in a prison in Egypt, and unfortunately he's been held in Communicado without access to a lawyer, and it's been 200 days now. He is actually on a hunger strike to draw attention to the cases of human rights violations in Egypt. So, people and planet, we need them both.
Thank you. Samira, your parting shots.
No, I think the same on the COP27 meeting. We hope that leaders from the global south are all unanimous in, agitating for, this fund that would help countries that can't, especially countries like Somalia, countries in the Horn of Africa, to adapt to the impact of climate change. I think this has been trashed by the US and the EU previously, and we hope that they can all be unanimous like they were at the UN Security Council recently.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Parting shots?
Thank you, Dubai. I want maybe to tell Kenyans that the KDF is now opening up. We used to be a closed society. We are now opening up, and therefore we want to work with Kenyans wherever they are in this country. Mr. Irungu, don't fear us. Come to us. Let's talk. We can better talk and advance issues together as opposed to talking on the sides and all that. And in doing that, I want again to reiterate the emphasis of the National Defense University Kenya, where we have gone out now to actually educate Kenyans on national security awareness, both in terms of government and other private and corporate entities. Come to us, we'll discuss all that. We'll discuss our national values. We'll discuss leadership and governance and how best, what if the military, you're able to take your organization to where you desire. We run a one-week package. It's quite open. We tailor it to suit the needs of different clients, and we're happy to engage and build this country and grow from where we are.
Thank you, Brigadier. Yeah, parting shots, 30 seconds.
For me, it's to congratulate those who have managed to pull this talk between Addis Ababa and the Tigray Liberation Front. That talk is very important, very, very important for the region. And I just want to put a word of caution that this is not business as usual. This is not what you go to Congo, to whatever, what we call the liberal peace. The liberal peace here is where you have a formula of how to solve problems, which is you start with the talks, then you have power sharing, then you have elections, and you assume that you get democracy. Ethiopia is not like that. We've got to think deeply about this. It's a very unique case. Ethiopia is one of the countries that have never been colonized in Africa. It has its traditional structures intact. And therefore, to save it from civil war, or the third and fourth civil war, we need to have a comprehensive understanding of the context in which the peace is being sought.
Thank you. Professor Peter Kagwanja, CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, coming through this morning for us. Always a treat to have you here. Thank you for your cogent, of course, sentiments this morning that you've helped Kenyans to actually analyze some of these things well. And we want to thank you as well, Brigadier General Retired Ahmed Mohamed, who is the Director of Center for Security and Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. Thank you. I also want to thank you, Rungi Houghton, Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya and Executive Director of Harala Institute from Somalia. Samira Gaid, thank you for coming through this morning as well. Thank you for your valid company. I know we didn't discuss a lot about DRC and Rwanda tensions. We just made mention of that as well in regard to the expelling of the Rwandan ambassador there, Vincent Karega, as well. Many are saying this was very undiplomatic from DRC, but this is multi-layered. We shall be unveiling or trying to unravel this next week. It's a developing story. Nonetheless, thank you for your valid company. Don't go away, much coming up on the other side of a break from our Mombasa Road studios with News Diary.